The podcast you're about to listen to may contain random lines from musical theater, terrible attempts at regional accents, and a sincere discussion about mental health. You have been warned. Are you ready to start singing with your feet? Formidable! Allez, c'est parti! Non, nous ne sommes pas fous, nous ne sommes pas ivres, nous sommes juste dans la joie. Une joie profonde, nos cœurs elle inonde. Cette joie, elle vient du ciel. Non, nous ne sommes pas fous.
Welcome to Sing With Your Feet. My name is Lily Fields, and I'm going to be your fairy godmother for the next half hour or so. This week, we are going to talk about something that we have skillfully avoided talking about for the last 40 episodes or so. Unfortunately, it was bound to come back up again because it is truly an important subject. It is a subject that geeks me out, but I have been loath to actually talk about it. As a matter of fact, in the early episodes of the podcast, I had a recurring bit where I would whisper certain words so as not to wake up the philosopher princess, who I warned you was a dry and boring and hoity-toity ninny. But that said, the aforementioned words that might wake up the philosopher princess are ones that continue to intrigue me, and ones that I really do believe have the potential to get us closer to living our ideal lives. And if this is true, then I have to stop hiding behind some annoying character and recognize that there is an enormous cognitive dissonance that happens when I, a horrendously unvirtuous person, starts talking about a subject as stuffy and as dry as that of living virtuously. See, I did it. I just used the stupid voice. Even saying those words out loud all but makes me feel certain that a lightning bolt will, and deservedly so, zap me. Because, let's be honest, we are very, very quick to point out the hypocrisy of people who pontificate about squishy, somewhat noble-sounding things like virtue and values. The word virtue evokes, for me at least, a Victorian woman in a lace blouse with buttons done up tidily in the back. It's the self-sacrifice of Penelope with the self-denial of Jane Eyre. Virtue is also a religious-y sounding word, and as we'll see next week, there maybe is a bit of that. Virtue is also a nice little philosophical kind of word, and I will argue eventually that there might even be a bit of psychological bent to our concept of virtue. Values is a word that means very little anymore because it has become a kind of bludgeon, deprived of any kind of precise meaning. It's the password for a club that, whether or not I actually share the values, it's a password for a club that I don't want to belong to. Those things being said, I still heartily agree that virtue and values are good things that will measurably increase my happiness. In the political discourse, there is a term that is called virtue signaling. Although I feel like we all kind of know what this means, I wanted to look up a definition just to make sure I wasn't completely misunderstanding it. So here's what I found. Virtue signaling: the public expression of opinions or sentiments intended to demonstrate one's good character or social conscience or the moral correctness of one's position on a particular issue. The thing with virtue signaling is that if it is done intentionally, then I believe that someone who's doing it has something to hide. Talk is cheap. Condensing the totality of our beliefs and the complexity of our motivating factors into 15-second sound bites is impossible, and anyone who can categorically signal their virtue in a 15-second soundbite is leaving something out. I would venture to guess that the something that is being left out is the part where all the subtlety lives, and is where the hypocrisy and cognitive dissonance has its space to fester. Talk is cheap, actions are priceless. I think this might be why, when it was learned that former President Jimmy Carter was unwell, that there was such a tremendous outpouring of empathy and compassion. Talk is cheap, actions are priceless. It is so much easier to say we think that it's important to be generous, humble, and hardworking than it is to actually be generous, humble, and hardworking. As a matter of fact, it is easier to make people believe that we are generous, humble, and hardworking than it is actually to be generous, humble, and hardworking. As I look at this conversation around virtue and values and think about why it is so hard to talk credibly about, it's because there is a spectrum of people who care about virtue and values, acknowledging that some people might simply not care one way or the other. So at one end of the spectrum, we have talk, and at the other end, we have walk. At the talk end, there are people who say things with the right vocabulary to the right people, but never get down to the hard work of walking the walk. Towards the middle, there are the people who show up at the right places at the right time to make sure that they are seen being virtuous, putting in face time if necessary. There are the other people who actually do the things and walk the walk, whether or not they ever actually talk about it. And I believe that the people who actually do the things are the people who talk about the things the least. There was a time in history when virtue was an absolute. Family honor was paramount, a man's word was his bond, and all that stuff that makes Jane Austen, not to mention Bridgerton, novels so heartrending. All that virtue stuff, it seems so old-fashioned. I think that maybe virtue and honor and respect can exist today, and that, well, of course they should exist today, and that the world will be a better place if we all started living to the best of our ability with a little bit more attentiveness and a lot less judginess. I do not believe that talk of virtue and values should have a place in politics, and I think that too many people are suspicious, and with good reason, of organized religion for the church or the temple or whatever to be the place where this is talked about too. I don't know where we should be talking about virtues and values, but I do know that we should be talking about it. Aristotle said that the pursuit of virtue is the path to happiness. And if there is even a tiny bit of truth to this, and I like to believe that there is, then somebody needs to be talking about it outside of politics and outside of the church. So for me, a fairy godmother and an internet stranger, to want to get into the mud and start talking about virtue, well, I suppose I have some credibility. I mean, I am by far one of the least virtuous people I know. I am perfectly aware that I am a hysterical hypocrite when it comes to virtue. I'm starting to wonder if to be able to talk about virtue, you don't have to have virtue bona fides. You need to be willing to admit that you are not virtuous, but that you know that pursuing virtue can measurably improve your experience of life. I mean, I don't feel like a hypocrite when I'm talking about pursuing joy or happiness. If virtue is something that could lead to joy or happiness, then it deserves to be examined. It's just so hard to examine it without exposing how virtuous I actually am, exposing it at the very least to myself. It's one of those subjects that the more you learn about it, the more you realize how little you actually know. You know? So this week, I want to talk to you about a way I have chosen to frame the study of virtue with the hopes that you will want to dig into the subject as well. So, with no further ado, welcome to an unvirtuous person's guide to living virtuously. If you have ever followed my Instagram or my Facebook, you may have noticed that I love, not just love, but I am obsessed with color. I am passionate about how color makes me feel, how bright colors work together to create moods. I have a rapid fascination for the accurate naming of colors. When I was in college, the woman who named colors for Sherwin-Williams paints came and did a guest lecturer stint in one of my classes, and I was blown away by how much pop culture, art historical, and geopolitical knowledge was required for her job. The average layperson, me included, can have a face value instantaneous reaction to color. You know, we might love it, we might hate it, or we might have no opinion at all. But most of us will be ill-equipped to describe a color beyond its basics, primary or secondary, warm or cold, dark or light. And what is a color, actually? Two famous early 19th century philosophers, that's Schopenhauer and Goethe, had a long, and very heated debate about what color actually is. They even dragged discussions of Newton and Aristotle into it, which is important because we too will be dragging Aristotle into our discussion. Anywho, Schopenhauer and Goethe, they asked each other a lot of really interesting questions. Questions like, does color exist only once it hits our retina? Or is color first an intellectual concept and then a concrete reality? Is color more than just black and white? Can color be measured? What is it when we see a color after something has left our field of vision? Oh, it's so exciting and frustrating and deeply intriguing. Nowadays, we have objective methods for defining colors. We have the hex code and the RGB. There's Pantone, which is out there predicting trends and giving names to those fabulous colors. There is no longer the question, what is a color? But now it's, what do we do with all this fabulous color? Well, that is all the direction I would like to take with our conversation about virtue. Talking about virtue is very much like talking about color. There are many aspects to color that we, on a daily basis, do not bother to actually think about. When I'm looking for my yellow thermos, I don't question if it is actually yellow before the light hits it and reflects into my retina. Not to mention that there are plenty of other words that we could use to describe a color. Saturation, hue, shade, tint, purity. Nope. I just want to find my yellow thermos. To put this in virtue terms, we all know what, for example, honesty is. It's like my yellow thermos. I don't question the concept of honesty on a daily basis any more than I question the saturation or the hue of my yellow thermos. I mean, we know what it is, for the most part, because it isn't rocket science. We perceive virtue much like we perceive color. Side note, Schopenhauer and Goethe had quite a bit to say about the intellectualization of color, and it's delightful. Anywho, we might even have a spontaneous reaction to a certain virtue for whatever reason, and we will talk about these spontaneous reactions to certain virtues at length in next week's episode. In the same way that we can learn to talk about colors by examining all the different facets that make up the thing we see, that color, we can also look at the different facets of what makes up a virtue, working through the components and our natural affinities to it to make better informed decisions about whether or not we want that color or that virtue to be one that defines us. It may be a bit of a nerdy process, but if you stick with me, we might take a few steps together on the path to happiness as we take a look at virtue. Back in our very first episode of the podcast, I told you that one of my very favorite things to do is to sing at funerals. Side note, if you haven't gotten a chance, take a listen to Laeli Kelly's podcast, Death Becomes Her, and the episode that's called Threshold Choirs. It is absolutely mind-blowing. Anywho, I really like going to funerals because it's one of the very few rituals in life that reminds me of just how short my life is. So it's easy every day to get caught up in the daily grind, the dishes that need to get washed, the car lock that is malfunctioning, the keys that I can't find, and the kid that isn't sleeping well. Going to a funeral reminds me that all of these things are so insignificant in the big scheme of things. No one ever gets up at a funeral and says, "Well, boy, oh boy, she sure got her dishes done right away after the meals," or "that woman could never find her keys." Nope. The things that make up what occupies my attention on a daily basis are not the things people will talk about at my funeral. So I liked going to funerals because it helps me do what I call relativizing, a reminder that I am small and most of my struggles are insignificant and won't last forever. The things that people will talk about at my funeral are not the what I did, but the who I was. So what I really love about funerals is to hear the life stories about who people were. I love to hear about people who confronted challenges head on. I love it when a nurse or a home health aide gets up and talks about how beautiful the person's last days were. I love it when someone tells a story that makes everyone in attendance laugh. With their hankies in hand, people are laughing and crying at the same time. It moves my soul. I love funerals for people who have left a legacy of joy, of generosity, of courage, of humility. You can just feel it, even as the family is arriving, that this is going to feel more like a celebration than a painful goodbye. Sadness is normal. Crying at a funeral, it's natural. But when family and friends gather together to celebrate a life that is well lived, there are more smiles than tears.
Elle me fait bondir et vibrer, crier. Elle me donne envie de chanter, danser. Elle pousse à agir, donner, partager. Et tout simplement de sourire, aimer.
Even when there wasn't much of any compliment to be paid to the defunct, and I have attended a few of those, someone will manage to say something like, "Well, he sure did believe in being on time," summarizing a person's life into a soundbite. That's not quite as reductive as the hyphen between two dates on a headstone, but still, there is still so much of life to funnel down into a few words. After the funeral director has ushered the last of the guests out of the room, and I wander back to my car, probably still clutching my hanky, I inevitably will ask myself, what will they say at my funeral? The they in question doesn't really target anyone in particular. My family, my friends, maybe a nurse or a neighbor or my kid's teacher or the parents of their classmates. What will the people who knew me say about me when I am no longer of this world? Whether that day comes when my boys are little, like they are today, or when they're adults with white hair, what stories will they tell that will make the people who attend my funeral smile or laugh through their tears? Will living without me be a challenge for my husband, or will he be visibly relieved by my departure? Will the person who presides over my memorial service, who maybe didn't even know me, have heard enough about me from the people who loved me to say that I was kind, generous, patient, a good listener, unintentionally funny, and joyful? I want to reassure you of something. In the famous words of your wicked stepsister, Lila Kelly, death doula extraordinaire, thinking about death won't kill you. In fact, thinking about how you want to be remembered may just help you prioritize your life today. Let's imagine that you are arriving at a reception hall. Outside the room, there are a few people you recognize standing around an easel and chatting. A small grouping is standing at a table, writing in a book. You catch a glimpse of what is on the easel and you see that it is a photograph of yourself. Yep, this is the reception after your public burial. The official memorial service, or the graveside eulogy, it's over. This is the time when your friends, work colleagues, family members, they are going to have coffee and cake, and in France we would have champagne, so if you like that idea, go for it. People are talking softly. Between the burial and this reception hall, the crowd has considerably dwindled. There were unexpected people who showed up at your memorial, the cashier from the grocery store that you'd been talking to over the last few weeks, the pastry chef that you like to chat with at the corner shop, your kids' friends' parents, maybe your high school friends. Those people have gone back home. And the people here now are the people who have known you the longest, and they are the ones who are going to support your family during their loss. As a matter of fact, let's imagine that there is champagne and that your spouse thanks everyone for their attendance and even gives a toast in your honor, after which the attendees break up into little smaller groups. And now, my dear fly on the wall, it is time for you to find out what they have to say about you. For example, your work colleagues. They are the people with whom you have a rather cordial relationship. You're curious. What will they have to say? "She was nice," says a colleague with whom you worked for years. You look down at her from her perch on the wall. The intonation of her voice at the end of her sentence makes it rather clear that she didn't intend to end there. You work together long enough to know that she always says what she's thinking, and this woman looks to the left, looks to the right, and then she leans in, her voice dropping to a whisper. She uses a conjunction that, if you were not already dead, would probably have killed you. "She was nice, but..." Oh la 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 la. She was nice, but she took herself too seriously. She had no sense of humor. Or maybe, on the contrary for you, my dear fly friend, he was gregarious and friendly, but he couldn't get down to business. What a distraction. Ay, 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 you weren't expecting that. "Honesty is great, but he could be quick to criticize," says another colleague. Or, "She wanted consensus so badly that she never made any decisions," adds another. Most of us have some capacity to self-reflect. It's those serial killers and narcissists in the true crime podcasts that I can't seem to turn off that don't have any ability to put a mirror up to their own character. Most of us can step back and see, even if it's vaguely, what is truly going on in our hearts and in our minds. Admittedly, self-reflection is not always fun. I mean, stepping back to consider that maybe my desire for everyone to be happy with a solution made me a wishy-washy manager is not a fun conclusion to arrive at. Just like discovering that my need to be taken seriously was turning me into someone with zero tolerance for pleasantries and humor. But developing a habit of self-reflection, like our ideal life exercise, gives structure to the process. Self-reflection is kind of like a muscle. The more we do it, the better we get at it. And it is an exercise after all. Once we've gotten into the habit of daily asking ourselves, what's working, what isn't working, what do I need to think about, and what do I need to do, we're ready to start giving some serious thought to what we want people to say about us when we're gone. Thinking about what I want people to say about me when I'm gone is how I start assembling the puzzle pieces of my life. And just like with a puzzle, I'm going to start with the edge pieces and the corners. Remember, we've said this many, many times before, but we only receive a certain amount of time on this planet. We have a toolbox full of natural talents and interests and abilities, and we have an amount of treasure. That is what we have to live out our life, and it is what we have to make this world a better place. Thinking about what I want said about me after I'm gone helps me imagine how I'm going to use my time, my talent, and my treasure to make sure that what I want said about me actually gets said. I really believe that the edges and the corners of each of our individual puzzles are composed of the virtues and values that we esteem to be important. But as we discovered when we were being a fly on the wall at our funeral reception, sometimes a virtue has a flip side. We can be too honest. If we are wielding honesty without the wisdom to know when it has crossed the line into criticism, we can be too friendly if we're bludgeoning our colleagues with our gregariousness. So what we're going to do next is to take a look at a list of virtues and then think about how we would rate ourselves on a scale from 1 to 10. What's important is how we react to this list of virtues, with the goal of seeing which ones speak to us, which ones we react negatively to, and which ones we feel neutral towards. Later, we're going to examine what those different reactions might mean. When I say that we're going to grade ourselves, I want it to be clear that this isn't a test. There's no getting A+ on this quiz. Think of it more like one of those "which Beatles songs are you?" quizzes on Facebook. It's not an indictment of who you are as a person, and is by no means something that you should look at and say, well, now, aren't I an awful person? There is something to learn from just doing this quiz. Now, if you're like me, you're probably driving around listening to this podcast, or maybe making dinner or taking a walk. So doing a quiz isn't exactly ideal for this activity. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to put a link to the quiz in the show notes, and you'll be able to take some time to download it from my blog, so you can do it later when you have some time. And you don't have to copy down some of these rather long words. Resourcefulness, industriousness, I'm looking at you. At the tail end of this podcast, after I sign off, I will come back and read the 101 virtues for your consideration. You can keep on driving or cooking or taking your walk. You can listen to me read them if you want to get a jump start on thinking about them. Additionally, I'm going to upload just the instructions for the quiz, and yours truly will read the 101 virtues into your podcast feed on Friday. That way, you won't have to go searching through this podcast to listen to them all later. That's what the additional podcast this week is going to be in your feed. So we have got our work cut out for us, Cinderella. But first, the segment in the podcast where I take a look at how I have been doing on my New Year's resolution of living out the Golden Rule. I call this part the Golden Rule Rules. Remember when I had a series of weeks there when I said that maybe the best thing to do when you're thinking about what you would want done for you is to just do nothing? That has been a bit of a recurring theme this year as I figure out how to live out the Golden Rule. Well, I happened across an interesting TikTok video from a child psychologist which suggested a few questions to ask our kids over dinner. One of them was, what is one thing that we worry about too much that we don't need to? And the other one was, what is this one thing that we don't worry about enough? So obviously, I tried these questions out on my kids. My eldest told me that the one thing my husband and I worried about too much was his schoolwork. This was very, very interesting because schoolwork has been a bone of contention between the two of them, my husband and my eldest son, right around that time. So having a philosophy teacher as a father, I admit, it can't be easy, but I digress. The fact that he had put that into words was already incredibly grown up of him. And his father did his best to back off, pushing him into doing his homework and quizzing him on his verb conjugations. I just sat back and I watched, knowing that the last thing I would have wanted at his age would be to have my mother on my back about doing homework. And you know what happened? After we both backed off for a few weeks, my eldest, in the blink of an eye, announced that he wanted to be a straight A student and that he wanted to work every day on his conjugations and times tables and to practice his double bass. He came up with this on his own program, and he has been sticking to it every single day since. He came to us and he asked us to help quiz him. And I'll be darned, he has actually started making progress. Being attentive to what we want from him and then giving him the opportunity to express what he believed to be true about our attention and what he wanted from us, then giving him that space, it was the doing nothing and giving him the space that I will forever attribute to the turning over of a new leaf for his ability to self-motivate when it comes to schoolwork. So, yay, golden rule for the win. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Check out the show notes for the link to the document I talked about, and stay after in just a second for me to read those 101 virtues for you. I want to give a great big thank you to 7 Productions here in Mulhouse, France for the use of the song La Joie as the intro and outro to the show, to Matt Kugler, whose new album Aventura dropped this month and can be found on all the digital music platforms, also to Claude Ekwe, who wrote that song. This is your fairy godmother signing off. Just remember, it's never too late to start singing with your feet. 101 Virtues, read to you by Lily Fields. Number 1, acceptance. Number 2, affection. Number 3, authenticity. Number 4, authority. Number 5, availability. Number 6, bravery. Number 7, brotherly love. Number 8, candor. Number 9, clarity. Number 10, commitment. Number 11, compassion. Number 12, consistency. Number 13, contemplation. Number 14, contentment. Number 15, conviction. Number 16, cooperation. Number 17, courage. Number 18, courtesy. Number 19, creativity. Number 20, curiosity. Number 21, decisiveness. Number 22, determination. Number 23, dignity. Number 24, diligence. Number 25, discernment. Number 26, discipline. Number 27, discretion. Number 28, efficiency. Number 29, endurance. Number 30, enthusiasm. Number 31, fairness. Number 32, faith. Number 33, faithfulness. Number 34, forgiveness. Number 35, friendship. Number 36, frugality. Number 37, generosity. Number 38, gentleness. Number 39, godliness. Number 40, goodness. Number 41, graciousness. Number 42, gratitude. Number 43, gravitas. Number 44, honesty. Number 45, honor. Number 46, hope. Number 47, hospitality. Number 48, humility. Number 49, humor. Number 50, impartiality. Number 51, individuality. Number 52, industriousness. Number 53, initiative. Number 54, innocence. Number 55, integrity. Number 56, intelligence. Number 57, joy. Number 58, justice. Number 59, kindness. Number 60, knowledge. Number 61, learning. Number 62, lightheartedness. Number 63, listening. Number 64, love. Number 65, loyalty. Number 66, lucidity. Number 67, memory. Number 68, mercy. Number 69, moderation. Number 70, modesty. Number 71, obedience. Number 72, objectivity. Number 73, observation. Number 74, orderliness. Number 75, patience. Number 76, patriotism. Number 77, peace. Number 78, perseverance. Number 79, prudence. Number 80, reasonableness. Number 81, regularity. Number 82, resourcefulness. Number 83, respect. Number 84, responsibility. Number 85, rigor. Number 86, self-control. Number 87, self-esteem. Number 88, serenity. Number 89, seriousness. Number 90, simplicity. Number 91, stewardship. Number 92, teachability. Number 93, teamwork. Number 94, temperance. Number 95, tenacity. Number 96, tolerance. Number 97, trust. Number 98, uprightness. Number 99, wisdom. Number 100, wonder. Number 101, zeal.